In this video, let's think about other function math SAT problem. So the question is their function f and g, and they're defined the function f is equal to 8x squared minus 2, and g of x is equal to negative 8x squared plus 2, and they're graphed in the xy plane, and the graph f and g intersects at the point k, 0 and the negative k, 0. And what is the value of k? So in this question, we are trying to find the value of k. So before we solve for this question, let's think about in terms of the function f and g. So let's write our two functions down, and our first function is f of x, and f of x is equal to 8x squared minus 2. And our second function is g of x is equal to negative 8x squared plus 2. And let's think about these functions. And for this function, our variable, which we also call it unknown quantity in this case, will going to be x. And it has the second degree term, which means by that is, the highest power of this function will going to be 2. And according to the function property, we can see that it is a quadratic function. And quadratic function, if we graph it, it will going to be a parabola. And let's think about the basic format, the basic thing about the quadratic function. And for the quadratic function, we can also think about the format of it, and it is dependent by the leading coefficient, which means by that is the leading coefficient means the highest power degree term, which is x, and their coefficient will going to be our leading coefficient. First, for f of x, the leading coefficient will going to be 8, and for g of x, the leading coefficient will going to be negative 8. And let's apply our basic format of quadratic function. And usually we make a notation for the leading coefficient. We usually call it a. And there are two cases in the quadratic function. When the a value is greater than 0, which means when it is positive value, the graph will go upward. And these are things that we learned in the previous videos. And if the a value is less than 0, which means when it is negative value, the graph will go downward. And for the upward value, the upward means the graph opens upward like this case, which means it will keep grow to the upward, and that means only the minimum point will exist in that graph. And it is a opposite kind of thinking about the a less than 0. A is less than 0, the graph will go downward, which means it will grow infinitely to the downward direction. And that means in that graph, the only maximum point exists. And these are our basic function property. So we can actually apply that. For the a is greater than 0, which means this case the f of x value, because it has the leading coefficient which is 8 and it is greater than 0. So we can see that the f of x function will grow upward. And in an opposite way, the g of x has negative 8, which is the case it goes downward. So we can write it as g of x, the graph of it will go downward. And we kind of think about the basic functions property. And in the question it says the both function intersects at the point. Let's think about what it means by intersect. intersect means the functions meet together. And they said the functions meet at the points k, 0 and the negative k, 0. So let's think about the intersecting point, which are in k, 0 and negative k, 0. And before I think about these terms, let's think about in terms of basic coordinate of functions. When we usually write our basic function coordinate, we usually write it as x, y. And k, 0 and negative k, 0 are the same kind of logic but different way to write x, y, which means the k and the negative k are the values of x values in our function, and 0 will going to be our y value. And we can think about it in this way. Only thing that we are trying to find is the value of the k, and we don't have to worry about negative, which means when we input the value of 0 to our original function, we can get our value of k, which will going to be our x coordinate of our function. So basically, we can just pick any function right over here because these points and these points satisfy both of our function. So let's just pick f of x because f of x for the g of x it is negative 8, which means it contains the negative of the leading coefficient, and it can make our calculation a little bit hard. So for the f of x is equal to 8x squared minus 2. And let's input the value of 0 to our y value. And our y value in this case will going to be f of x. So let's convert f of x into y so that we can easily understand. And y is equal to 0. And 0 should be equal to 8x squared minus 2. And we're trying to find the value of x, which will basically k. And all you have to do is we can add 2 to the both sides to isolate the x terms. And then we will get negative 2 and the positive 2 we're going to cancel out. And in the left side we get 2 is equal to 8x squared. And now we can divide 8 to the both sides so we can get rid of it and isolate the x term. We will get 2 over 8, which we can simply do it as 1 over 4 is equal to 8 divided by 8 cancels out, we get x squared. But we are basically trying to find the value of the x, not x squared. So all you have to do is take the square root. So take the square root to the both sides. If you take a square root to the both sides, we will get square root of 1 over 4 that is equal to square root of x squared, but the square and the square root are going to cancel out, we get x term. And now the thing that we need to do right now is for the square root of 1 over 4, we can use a property of the square root. It is the same thing as square root of 1 over square root of 4. And basically square root of 1 is 1 and square root of 4 is 2. So we can see that our value of x value is 1 over 2. But if we write our answer down, so when you write our answer down, if you write x, we will get wrong because they mention about the x term into the k value. So our k value will going to be 1 over 2, which our final answer will going to be B. Now let's think about in terms of graphs of function. The reason why we're thinking about the graphs of function is because it is not that important when it comes to solving for SAT math this question. But if you go to more advanced function math problem, it's hard to solve for it if you don't exactly know about the graphs. First, let's write our two functions down. So at first, f of x is equal to negative 8x squared, or it is 8x squared, and then minus 2 under another function. G of x is equal to negative 8x squared plus 2. And before we actually graph this function, let's compare these functions to find the common properties. If we compare these functions, we can figure out that for f of x, 8x squared, for g of x, it is negative 8x squared. And f of x is negative 2, and the g of x is positive 2. If you think about it, the exact values are same, but the different signs, which means it will going to be a same function. So there will going to be a same function, but different. They will gonna be different type. That means at first we can draw 8x squared minus 2, and it will going to be something like this. And I'm assuming that we learned this quadratic function in the last previous videos. And the minimum point only exists, as we have learned right over here. The minimum point will going to be negative 2. But for g of x is equal to negative 8x squared plus 2, it will going to be a opposite of the ax squared plus 2, ax squared minus 2. And it will going to be something like this. But the maximum point will going to be a positive 2. And they are same function, which means the y of our graph will going to be exactly same. And they intersect at the point we know that k comma 0, but we can replace it as 1 over 2. It will going to be 1 over 2 comma 0. And also negative k comma 0, which is negative 1 over 2 comma 0. Now we can actually graph the functions. At first, let's graph f of x is equal to 8x squared minus 2. So 8x squared minus 2 is equal to f of x. Let's input some values. At first, let's input, we know that its minimum point will going to be negative 2, which means the y value is equal to negative 2, but the x value is equal to 0. And the y value is equal to negative 2, x value is equal to 0. When the x value is equal to 0, we call it y-intercept. So it will going to be 1, 2 right over here. And let's think about some points. But we can figure out that the intercept points intersect. So we can actually graph the intersect point. It is 1 over 2 comma 0, which will going to be this is 1 over 2, this is 1, this is 2, this is negative, 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 this is positive 1 over 2, positive 1, positive 2, which will going to be right over here, and then right over here. So we can basically kind of graph what it is to be look like the graph of f of x. And the f of x graph will look something like this, and it keeps going up. It only contains the minimum point as the leading coefficients. The value is positive. And let's think about the f of x, g of x is equal to negative 8x squared plus 2. And we can figure out that it's exactly the same thing but different, but opposite way. Which means the minimum point is 0 comma negative 2. Opposite of this will going to be 2 comma 0. And it will going to be right over here, and we can graph it in a different color. And it also passes through the intersecting line. So it will going to be like something like this that passes through our point and satisfy our graph. Our function g of x is equal to negative x squared plus 2. And our first graph will going to be f of x graph. and our second graph will going to be g of x graph. And we can clearly figure out some things that we figure out here. And if you think about our answer again, our answer in this question will going to be 1 over 2. And our 1 over 2 is a value of the x value of our intersecting points. And the reason why it is 0 is because it is on the x plane, which means the y value should be equal to 0. And this is what this quadratic function literally means.